This episode may contain content of a graphic nature, including descriptions of physical and sexual violence against adults, children, and animals. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi everyone, I'm Tanya.
And I'm Talia.
And we are Crimes and Consequences, a true crime podcast. Hi Talia.
Hi, Tanya.
How are you today?
I'm doing splendid. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
I hope all of our listeners are doing great.
Me too. So you're ready for an episode?
I absolutely am. I want to ask everybody, if they haven't done so already, to hit the subscribe/follow button. Now I'm ready.
Now you're definitely ready. Okay.
I got it out of my system.
Well, I'm going to tell you today about a serial killer.
I love serial killers.
But I'm not going to tell you his name till we get toward the end. So I'm going to tell you about all his victims.
Is it somebody I know?
I had never heard of him. But you know a lot more true crime than I do.
What's that say about me?
I know. You're like, oh, don't you remember so-and-so? And I'm like, no. So maybe you've heard of him, but I have never heard of him.
I can't remember what I did yesterday, but I can list every damn serial killer in the United States.
I know. And he actually went on trial like in 2000. So it wasn't that long ago. It's not like it happened in the 70s or something.
Well, I don't even know anything about this guy.
Okay, well, then let me start.
God damn, do it.
In the summer of 1975, two old childhood friends, 21-year-old Patrick Oliver and 22-year-old Susan Savage, were reuniting in Walla Walla, Washington.
Walla Walla?
That's fun to say.
Yeah, I like that.
Walla Walla. When they were children, they were inseparable, and they had a really tight bond that wasn't diminished when Patrick had studied abroad in Paris for a year and Susan went off to college to study design.
Were they lovers?
No, they were strictly friends. They were like best friends. Patrick had just finished that year in Paris that I told you about, and when he came home to Washington, the first thing he wanted to do was reconnect with Susan. On July 13th, 1975, Patrick called Susan up, and the two decided they were going to go on a picnic in one of Washington State's beautiful parks. Patrick and Susan were last seen on that day, the 13th, around 2:15. Patrick, who was driving his Mercury Cougar, picked up Susan, and they headed out to their picnic spot. They both told their parents that they'd be home for dinner. However, dinner time came and went, and there was no trace of Patrick and Susan. And they didn't tell their parents where they were specifically going, like which park. Their parents just knew that they were going on a picnic.
That's so cute.
I know. While their parents were concerned, Patrick's parents were a little more on edge. That was because Patrick's older brother James was killed in a car accident on the 4th of July, 1967. James lost control of his car and he ran into a tree, killing him instantly. James was only 18 at the time and his family never emotionally recovered. So when Patrick didn't show up for dinner, they didn't attribute it to like, oh, he's just maybe running late or something like that. Because Patrick's dad decided to search for the pair and he gathered a small search party. He had a feeling Patrick and Susan may have gone to Mill Creek, which is about 20 miles northeast of Seattle. And sure enough, the search party spotted Patrick's Mercury Cougar parked on the side of the road near Mill Creek. They walked along the bank of the creek and they found a pile of debris.
Is this the same day they're missing?
Yes, this is the same day they're missing. Patrick's family's right on top of it. The debris caught their attention because it was a really large pile and it seemed out of place in an area filled with so much natural beauty because it was like garbage. They moved closer and the debris pile was covered with a tarp held in place by an old tire. As the search party got closer, someone noticed a foot sticking out from under the debris pile.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. This caused Patrick's dad to drive to the county sheriff's office right away, where he told police what he and the group had discovered.
So this group, was that just made up of friends and family?
Yes. Patrick's dad had a feeling that it was probably Patrick and Susan, so the sheriff went to investigate right away. When the police came upon the scene, they removed the tire and some of the other debris and sadly found two bodies. It was Susan and Patrick, and their bodies had been arranged with Susan on top of Patrick. Susan was naked from the waist down with her blouse torn open, exposing her breasts. Patrick's body was fully clothed. When the police investigator looked closer, he found Patrick and Susan had been shot. Susan had been shot just below her left ear, which would have killed her instantly. Patrick was shot through his arm, and another shot was found on his shoulder. These were believed to be defensive wounds with one bullet causing the damage. Like, I think he must have put his hand up.
Oh, so he puts his hand up and the bullet goes through his hand and then through his shoulder?
Right.
Is that the only bullet wound?
No. There were 2 shots. That one, and then the second shot killed Patrick. It went right to his heart.
They could have only been dead for a few hours, right?
I know. They were right. It was only a few hours because it would have been after lunchtime, and they had last been seen about 2:15, so it was probably like 4, 5, 6 hours maybe. The medical examiner did the autopsies and found that Susan hadn't been sexually assaulted, which kind of confused the police as to what the motive could have been.
Yeah, because her pants are off.
Right. And, I mean, her blouse is pulled up. It seems kind of weird. Lacking a motive made investigating Patrick and Susan's death more difficult. There was a witness named Diane who came forward. She was in the area the day the pair had been shot. She was with her boyfriend, and they had had an argument, and Diane stormed off. Diane remembered hearing gunshots before running into a man in a clearing in the woods. She estimated his age to be no older than early 20s. He was shirtless, and she said he was medium height, slender build, with brown hair. It's kind of nondescript, but that's the best she could give the police.
Did he have a gun?
She didn't see a gun. Diane and the man stared at each other for a second, startled at the sight of one another, and they both ran in opposite directions. Diane thought maybe the man had been driving a small red car, kind of like a Ford Mustang. A $5,000 reward was offered for information leading to the arrest of who killed Patrick and Susan, but without a clear motive and even less evidence, their murders went unsolved for over 25 years. We're going to fast forward to August 26, 1997. On that day, Larry Jones, who was a former Vietnam veteran, was out searching for soda cans in the heat of Washington's summer.
In the woods?
In the woods.
Don't do that. You're going to find a body.
I know.
Don't they know this?
I know. He collected the cans and took them, for extra cash to a recycling plant. As he was searching, he ended up finding a body partially hidden under a tree. The body was in long grass next to a couple of metal tins, which is probably what attracted Larry to the spot. The body was of a woman who was partially clothed. She had been out in the elements for a little while, her skin showing signs of exposure. Decomposition had started. During the police investigation, a large amount of blood was found in a nearby parking lot, and it appeared the woman's body was dragged across the parking lot, then over an embankment to her final resting place. So she wasn't killed in the spot where she was found. The cause of death was a single gunshot to her head. The medical examiner was able to get fingerprints from her body, and she was identified as 20-year-old Heather Hernandez. Heather was originally from Arizona, and in Washington, she was a sex worker, and no one knew exactly how long Heather had been in Washington. The same day, a few hours later, as it began to storm, in nearby Mount Spokane, alfalfa farmers were harvesting their crop, trying to beat the rain before it soaked it. As the tractor gathered the alfalfa, the owner of the farm, Kevin, noticed the distinct smell of death. Ugh. At first, he thought maybe it's an animal. So his family finished up gathering the harvest, and Kevin made a call to the local sheriff's department. He said, maybe it's nothing, but you might want to come out here and investigate.
But maybe it's a rotting dead body.
Right. Answering the call, the sheriff's department arrived, and they found a body on the side of the road on the farm. Similar to the body that was found dragged through the parking lot that I just told you about, poor Heather, this body appeared to have been dragged through the field before being left out in the open field on the alfalfa farm.
How far apart are these two bodies?
They were within a couple miles of each other. The body was in a corner of the field where no one frequented, and you couldn't even see it until you were almost right up on it. The body was in much more advanced stage of decomposition than Heather's. Maggots were actively feasting on the body and the skin was leathery.
Gross.
I know. The arms were up around the head and the legs were straight out, like a burglar, but she was laying down.
I get so grossed out by maggots.
Oh, me too. They give me such the willies. It's just, ugh. The body was so decomposed that the police had a hard time determining what race the body was. But looking at the bone structure, they guessed the body was either Asian, Indian, or African American. The body still had her clothes on, and she was wearing a long blouse that could have been a short dress with long sleeves. It was unzipped and pulled past the shoulders over a black bra, which was pulled up almost over the neck and head, basically exposing her entire body, naked from the neck down. The clothing seemed to have dirt and grass stains on it, indicating she was definitely dragged to her final destination. She had long, dark hair and was wearing jewelry, specifically earrings and 2 rings on her finger. One was a plain gold band with a pearl inlaid in it and green stones on either side of the pearl. The police hoped maybe the ring would help identify the woman because it was so distinct. Analyzing the dump scene lasted several days, and the police searched through the field and surrounding areas, basically like with a fine-tooth comb. They found a used condom near the road, along with a pair of high-heeled shoes in the victim's size. They also found men's underwear and a broken car radio antenna. Blood was found along the trail that seemed to have been formed when the body was dragged. Lastly, black panties, size small, were found along with a towel covered in blood.
With a towel?
Mm-hmm.
That's weird.
Isn't it? Her cause of death couldn't be immediately determined due to the advanced state of decomposition. However, a small circular hole was on the shirt, dress, blouse, whatever it is, leading the police to believe that she had been shot. When the autopsy of the woman in the alfalfa field was done, the medical examiner found that a button was missing from the left cuff of her shirt dress. The police's theory of cause of death was correct. She died by a gunshot wound to her chest by a .22 caliber handgun.
That's a small caliber,
It's a small
isn't
caliber, yes. And Heather was also killed with a small caliber gun. The woman in the alfalfa field was eventually identified as 16-year-old Jennifer Joseph, who worked as a sex worker. And she lied about her age. People thought she was 19. Jennifer and Heather knew each other and traveled in the same social circles. Jennifer's father was in the Army and traveled around the country, and Jennifer was supposedly in the Spokane area, living with her boyfriend, who the police weren't able to locate initially. During the police investigation, police found other sex workers who knew Jennifer. So they start to talk to a lot of these women. One told police the last time she'd seen Jennifer was August 16th, 10 days before her body was found. She said the last time she saw Jennifer was when she was getting into a sports car that looked kind of like a Porsche. Jennifer wasn't really liked very much by the other girls on the street. It was because she was half Korean, and it seemed like she was really popular with the customers because of her Asian heritage.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Like as soon as she'd get out of somebody's car, somebody else would pick her up.
And so they were jealous?
They were jealous. I know.
It's a strange world we live in.
It is. The woman who said she had last seen Jennifer getting into this sports car, police took her to a used car lot and asked her if there were any cars that looked like the one that she saw Jennifer get into. In that lot was an actual Porsche, and the police asked her if the car looked like that one. It didn't. However, the woman saw another car that happened to be parked on the street that looked exactly like the one she saw Jennifer getting into. It was a white 1975 Chevy Corvette.
Little red Corvette.
Which a Corvette and a Porsche really don't look like each other, but okay.
I don't know shit about cars.
They really don't look alike. Police got to know a lot of the women, as I mentioned, who worked the street along with Heather and Jennifer. One of them told the police about a van that creeped her out. It was a light brown Chevy with dark brown flames on the side.
Oh, it's got flames on it?
It's got flames on it.
Oh, shit.
It had an eagle on one of the back doors where the spare tire would normally be. The driver was a white guy in his 40s, which wasn't much for police to go on. However, they took the information down.
Well, that's a very distinctive van.
It is, isn't it? They asked the woman, why did the guy in the van seemed suspicious to her, and she said that when she first saw the van, the windows were normal, but the last time she saw it, the windows were tinted.
How about just he's driving a van with flames on it? Right there. That's all you need to say.
She said the van gave her bad vibes, but other ladies, her associates, said the guy in the van was harmless because they had known him. However, the witness said that she saw Heather Hernandez getting into the van a few days before the police found her body. A few months later, on November 5th, 1997, a man was out walking his dog along the side of a road. He noticed that the last 5 days that he had walked his dog, the dog was especially interested in this one spot every time they passed it. He ignored it until November 5th. When he investigated further, he found a body and he called police. When the police arrived, they found that the body was partially buried. It was about 60 feet from the road, and it had been dumped near a small creek that ran parallel to the road.
Partially buried, what's that mean?
Well, the head, one arm, and one leg were visible and sticking out of the partial grave, with the rest of the body being buried. So it was a very shallow grave. The arm was clothed in a long-sleeved blue shirt. They weren't sure as to why the killer only buried his victim halfway. She was laying on her back with her legs seeming like they were curled up close to her chest. The body had been there long enough for decomposition to have begun, and the exposed areas of the body were also feasted on by the animals in the forest. So basically skeletal. This portion of whatever was sticking out was skeletal.
But the rest
is under the ground.
Ooh.
Isn't that creepy? Despite the amount of decomposition, the police noticed a round wound on the skull, indicating she was shot in the head. 2 plastic bags were found in the grave with her body. And when I say plastic bags, I mean like grocery bags. Plastic bags. The medical examiner who did the autopsy determined the body was that of a woman about 5.5 feet tall, between 20 and 30, between 120 and 140 pounds. Her cause of death was a bullet to the head, and the coroner found 2 bullet holes, the entry wound and the exit wound. He determined the bullet came from a .25 caliber handgun.
So not a 22.
Not a 22. Still small. Swabs were taken from her mouth, vagina, and anus in the hopes of finding DNA. Dental records were used to identify her, and she was 29-year-old Darla Scott, a sex worker from Spokane who had been reported missing. Darla was a drug addict and had no contact with her parents. She had a daughter who was with the baby's father. Police interviewed him, and he told police that when Darla was pregnant, she had gotten clean and had hoped having the baby would make her strong enough to stay away from the streets and the drugs it offered. However, she relapsed not long after the baby was born.
Crack a smack.
I know, it's sad. He had last heard from Darla in October, so maybe she'd been missing almost a month. Her twin sister reported her missing, even though most of the people who knew her thought she'd probably relapsed or taken up with a trucker, which she'd been known to do.
Taken up with a trucker?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my girl.
Darla had been known by police because she'd worked as an informant.
Oh.
And she was a great asset to them. She knew a lot about what was happening on the streets, and she had no problem telling the police everything she knew. When she was found murdered, it was speculated that she was probably found out to be a police informant and was killed for being a snitch.
Snitches get stitches.
I love that quote.
And ditches.
I love it. I know, I love that saying. Before I continue the story, we're going to take a break. About a month later, on December 7th in Tacoma, Washington, the body of 24-year-old Melinda Mercer was found. And Tacoma is around 5 hours away from Spokane, so it's quite a distance.
I want to point out to you, Tanya, that there seems to be an awful lot of serial killers in the state of Washington.
Doesn't it seem that way?
It sure does.
It does.
Isn't Ted Bundy? I mean, hello,
right.
Ted Bundy
was there.
Green River Killer.
Mm-hmm.
We have episode 17, Seattle Peakrest.
A lot of Washington.
Something going on there in Washington.
Is it in the water? Melinda Mercer turned to prostitution in November 1997 to support her heroin addiction. She was last seen alive on the night of December 6, 1997, leaving a Seattle tavern. Melinda left the tavern to go to make some money to pay for the heroin she wanted to buy.
Was she a sex worker?
Yes, she was a sex worker. On the following morning, her nude body was found in some blackberry bushes in a vacant lot in Tacoma. A lot that people used as a dump site for trash and whatever. I'm picturing old couches and a refrigerator.
That's
like
exactly
that
what I
kind
am
of,
too.
Mm-hmm. An autopsy was performed on Melinda, and it showed that she had been shot 3 times in the back left side of her head. Only one of the 3 bullets, though, penetrated her brain. When it went into her head, she still survived it. Found nearby her body was a .25 caliber shell casing. Her clothing was found nearby her body, and bloodstains on her blouse showed that she had been wearing clothes and she was sitting upright when she was shot in the head. After shooting her, the killer put 4 plastic grocery bags over her head.
I don't understand this after shooting her. Why someone would do that?
I don't either. I don't get it. The 2 outer bags that were over her head didn't have a lot of blood, but there was substantial amount of blood pooled in the first 2 bags. Melinda's nostrils and her upper lip, you could see them through small tears in the 2 inner bags, which meant that she had chewed through them.
Wow.
Before she died. And she could have died from the gunshot wounds eventually, but the autopsy indicated that she died from oxygen deprivation. A couple weeks after Melinda was found, actually the week before Christmas, a body was found by a team of maintenance workers from a nearby sewage plant. They were working off-site and found the body, which was very close to the spot where Darla Scott's body had been found the month previous. She was identified as 36-year-old Shawn Johnson, and her body was found with some leaves and foliage covering her, kind of like in a half-assed attempt to hide her. Similar to other victims, it appeared she was killed elsewhere and dumped where she was found. Her body was found with 2 plastic bags over her head, but suffocation wasn't the cause of death. It was 2 gunshots to her head.
Do you think he's putting the bags over her head to stop the blood?
That's what I wonder, because I didn't read anything that mentioned holes in the bags. Shawn was a sex worker from the Spokane area who frequently used drugs. Her drug dealer actually gave helpful information to the police.
Well, isn't that kind?
I know. Shawn owed him money, but he knew her, and he knew she would eventually pay him. Her regular job was at a gas station, and she would work the streets when she needed extra money. He kept in regular contact with Shawn, mainly due to the thousands of dollars that she owed him. One day, he just stopped hearing from her, and he got worried about her. Before she disappeared, her family had last seen her at her son's wedding 2 months before. Shawn was trying to get clean then.
At her son's wedding?
Mm-hmm. I know, she's only 36, and I believe her son got married. He was also young. I want to say around 20, so I think she was a teenage mom. Sunny Oster was reported missing on Christmas Eve 1997. She had been in Spokane staying at a rehab facility for her drug addiction. When her family couldn't reach her, after a while they reported her missing. Her body wasn't found until February 8th, 1998, with 3 plastic bags over her head and 2 bullets in her brain. She was fully clothed. 39-year-old Shawn McClenahan, so I'm going to call her McClenahan because we just had Shawn Johnson. She had last been seen on Christmas Eve, just before 6 p.m., where a man had seen her crying in a grocery store parking lot. The man that saw her crying in the parking lot was an acquaintance of her, and he went up to her to see what was wrong. She was trying to get clean and seemed determined to get into a local methadone program so she could quit heroin. And this is why she was upset, because she really wanted to quit and she wanted to get into this methadone program. When she was feeling better, the man left and she promised to call him later that night, but the call never came. Her body was found jammed into a ditch in a woody part of Spokane County. The body of 31-year-old Lori Wasson was laying next to her. So 2 bodies were found. The bodies were found by a man and his son who were out walking when they noticed legs wearing jeans coming out of a pile of wet leaves.
Oh, jeez.
Can you imagine?
God damn.
Be like, what is that?
Oh, my God.
Oh, my God, that looks like legs. At first, only 1 set of legs was found, so initially it was thought there was only 1 body.
And then there's another set. Oh, shit, double shit.
I know, so when they uncovered McClanahan, the other body was there of Lori, and she was faced in the opposite direction. So they kind of had their heads like next to each other. So they were pointing in opposite directions. So Lori's feet were not with McClanahan's. One of the bodies was missing a foot, and I don't think it was ever found. At first, police thought the bodies had been there a little while because leaves and other natural debris seemed to have piled up around the bodies. They're in this ditch, and there's all this debris jammed into the same area. However, the debris was found to have not been from the area around the ditch. It had been brought to the dumping site.
So the killer intentionally covered them up.
Yes.
And brought his own debris?
His own yard waste.
Oh, wow.
Weird, right?
That is
so fucking weird.
It's weird. I suppose, after raking leaves, I put them in a bag, and instead of putting them on the curb,
gonna go cover someone up with
just
them.
Cover some bodies with it.
Both Lori and Sean had plastic bags around their head, like other victims, but instead of 2, like with Sean Johnson, there were 3. Both women had been killed with 2 gunshots to the head. The difference between the 2 was that Lori had been dead longer because the decomposition was worse on her body than on McClanahan's.
That's what I was going to ask, so they weren't killed at the same time.
No. So I'm thinking the killer covered Lori up, and then when he killed Sean a little while later, I don't know if it was a matter of days, then he dumped her along with Lori. About 4 months later, on April 1st, 1998, 34-year-old Linda Mabin's body was found. She was found in a shallow grave, a mere 50 yards from where Sean McClanahan and Lori Lawson's bodies were found. Very close.
What is this, like 8 victims now?
Yes, around that. And there's more. Linda was found with 2 plastic bags over her head, 1 gunshot wound to her head, and a condom protruding from her rectum.
Oh, no.
There was DNA in it, FYI. She was covered by plant trimmings that were not from where her body was found, so very similar to where Lori and McClanahan had the yard waste. Linda also had foreign yard waste on her. Linda had been reported missing November 29th, 1997. So this is 5 months later. On July 7th, 1998, 47-year-old Michelin Durning's body was found in Spokane under some styrofoam and 2 hot tub covers that had come from a pile of junk in a vacant lot nearby. She was found by a homeless person, and this area is not a very good area, just to give you an idea. She was nude, and her lower denture that was engraved with her name was missing from her mouth. She had been shot in the head once, and her toxicology showed positive for methamphetamine. She's the only victim who was not raped and was not killed at a different location and dumped where her body was found. She was killed where her body was found. Connie LaFontaine Ellis's body was found on October 13th, 1998, in addition to coma. Her body was badly decomposed and had 3 plastic bags over her head. She had been shot once in the head. As the body count began to pile up, police were desperate for answers and to catch the man who had killed all of these women. They had looked for owners of a white Corvette and cross-referenced the list with the names of people who had been arrested by police in the areas where the murdered sex workers frequented. One name eventually surfaced as possible suspect. It was 47-year-old Robert Lee Yates, Jr., who was called Bobby by his friends and family. Police brought him in for questioning. Bobby frequented sex workers in Spokane and apparently had a few close calls with the police. On November 10th, 1998, Bobby was pulled over with a sex worker in his car.
In the Corvette?
No. He was driving an old Honda that he owned, and he told police that he had only picked up the woman as a favor for her father, and he wasn't soliciting any sex, and supposedly the father worked with Bobby.
And he's like, hey, can you go get my sex-working daughter and give her a ride?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Police let him go, but they did file a report about the incident. And I mentioned that he had a few close calls with the police. So besides this one where he was pulled over with the sex worker, he had also been pulled over for making like an illegal turn or something similar to that the year prior. And the police are already looking for white Corvettes, and he was driving a white Corvette. The police officer who pulled him over, though, indicated on the report that it was a Camaro instead of a Corvette, so the report never made it to the task force that was investigating these murders. Police questioned Bobby on September 15th, 1999, and they questioned him about that November 1988 incident I just told you about, where he's just given the ride to the woman. Bobby repeated the same story, that he had picked her up as a favor to her dad, who was a coworker of his. But when police pressed him for the names of his coworker and the woman, he just couldn't provide one. They asked him about the white Corvette. Like, don't you own a white Corvette? And he told police that he had sold it and he no longer had it, which was true. Police asked him for a DNA sample before he left, and he refused.
At least he's not a dumbass.
Police eventually followed up with the sex worker that was in Bobby's car that November 1998 evening. She told them she'd been picked up by Bobby to perform oral sex for $20, and the story that Bobby had told about her father wasn't true, obviously. Police tracked down the new owner of the Corvette Bobby had sold to in January 2000, and she consented to a search. There were fibers from the car that matched fibers collected from Jennifer Joseph. She was the 16-year-old whose body was found in the alfalfa field. Also, her missing button was found under the passenger seat in the Corvette. DNA was also collected inside the car, and it matched Jennifer Joseph. Bobby was arrested on April 18, 2000 for Jennifer's murder. His DNA was collected because he had no choice now, and it matched DNA collected from all the victims I told you about, because he left his DNA with the ladies, because he raped them all. Patrick Oliver and Susan Savage, the first story I told you about, were believed to be Bobby's first killings. He was 23 years old at the time and working as a guard at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla.
He's working at a guard in the prison?
Mm-hmm. He had been hunting or shooting target practice when he happened upon the two friends, and he decided to kill them spontaneously.
That's just so crazy.
I know, right?
Reminds me of the Zodiac Killer a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
He shot them, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did.
It was all just happenstance, like...
Wrong place, wrong time. 23-year-old Stacy Hahn. I didn't tell you about her, but she's believed to be the first sex worker victim that Bobby killed. She disappeared around July 7th, 1997 in Seattle, and her skeletal remains were found 5 months later. Police told Bobby about Stacy as part of a plea deal he accepted to avoid the death penalty, and therefore helped to close an unsolved case, because she was just a Jane Doe at the time. 43-year-old Melody Murfin disappeared in 1998. Her body wasn't found until October 18th, 2000. And you want to know where she was?
Where?
She was buried in a flower bed in Bobby's backyard. And I haven't told you a lot about Bobby, but Bobby had a wife and kids. So her body is in the backyard. And when he was asked, why did you bury her in your backyard? He said he wanted to see her every day. Police searched his yard after his arrest. They hadn't found her, actually. It was only when Bobby told them she was there did they finally find her.
In the flower bed.
In the flower bed.
How did they not find a body buried in the flower bed?
Thank you.
Well, you gotta dig a little bit.
I know.
You gotta put some effort into this. That's ridiculous.
One victim of Bobby's managed to escape death. Christine Smith, who was 32, was robbed and attacked in Bobby's van, which was a brown van with brown flames on it.
I knew it! You do not drive a brown van with flames on it.
No.
Unless you're a serial killer.
She was attacked in his van on October 1st, 1998. She identified Bobby as her attacker after seeing his mugshot published in a local newspaper. She had been shot in the head after Bobby couldn't achieve an erection, and then he attacked and robbed her of the $40 he had just paid her. So he got angry and shot her. She ran out of the van. It all happened really fast, but she managed to get out of that van. And I have a funny story that I didn't write down about the van. There's one day where Bobby comes home. It's late. I believe it was even actually early morning hours, and he hadn't come home the night before. He runs to his wife and, wake up, I need some help. And he ran and got some cleaning supplies. He runs out to his van. And when his wife comes out there, she said the van was just covered in blood. There was a cot that was in the van that just had a pool of blood on it.
There's a cot in the van?
A cot in the van.
Okay.
I know. And the wife says, what the hell, basically. And he said he accidentally hit a dog. And when he went and picked up the dog, it was still alive. It was like a neighbor's dog who was out walking the dog. He hits this dog with the van because the dog supposedly ran out in front of his wheel. So the neighbor's there, they pick the dog up, they put the dog on the cot, and he takes the dog to an emergency vet. And he says that explained all the blood everywhere. And his wife was just, okay, fine. As long as I don't have to clean it up, she didn't care. All of his victims were either drug addicts, sex workers, or both, except for Patrick and Susan.
They're so random. Their death is so random.
Right. They were just, like we said earlier, in the wrong place at the wrong time. In 2000, in Spokane County, Bobby was charged with 13 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder for Christine. I mentioned earlier that he had accepted a plea deal. He pled guilty to all the charges in exchange for removing the death penalty as a possible sentence. He was sentenced to 408 years in prison. However, the following year, 2001, Bobby was charged in Pierce County for the murders of Melinda Mercer and Connie Ellis, and the prosecution sought the death penalty in that case. Bobby was eventually sentenced to death in those 2 cases.
Oh, he got so screwed.
I know. Psych! In Bobby's habeas corpus appeal in 2013, he heard from paraphilic disorder, which caused him to become a serial killer. Do you know what paraphilic disorders are?
Just tell me.
I'm just going to tell you. It basically meant he got off on raping and killing his victims. During that habeas corpus appeal, he did use the fact that he's a necrophiliac as a defense to say he was mentally ill. He was driven to become a serial killer because he wanted to perform necrophilia.
So that's why he killed.
That's why he killed.
And someone decided that would be an awesome defense strategy. Man, I'm going to get you out of this, okay? You're just going to say you were so compelled to have sex with a dead body you had to kill. Who thought this was a good idea? That is fucking funny.
The Pierce County prosecutor, Mark Lindquist, he said, quote, I don't think Mr. Yates helps his cause by relying on the fact that he's a necrophiliac.
Oh, that is funny. See, that just takes this whole new level.
The sources that I used were a book called The Spokane Killer, The Life of Serial Killer Robert Lee Yates, Jr. by Jack Smith. There were a ton of articles on Murderpedia that I also consulted, and serialkillers.com.
So tell me a little bit about this rat bastard.
I just wrote that, a little bit about Bobby. It's so funny you say that. I will tell you a little bit about Bobby. He was born May 27th, 1952. He grew up in Oak Harbor, Washington. And where Oak Harbor is, it's on an island in the Puget Sound area of Washington. Sound Lake was a lovely place. It was upscale. It was an upper middle class neighborhood. He graduated from high school in 1970. When he was 23, I told you he got a job as a prison guard at the Washington State Penitentiary.
What happened to little Bobby that turned him into this?
His family seemed relatively normal. His father was religious. They were Seventh-day Adventists, but it didn't seem like it was extreme or anything like that. I did not read anything about his childhood being strange, so this really made me wonder.
No mom issues?
No mom issues. There was a story in his family that his grandmother killed his grandfather. I'm not sure why, but that was the only thing that made you raise an eyebrow. This is kind of what scared me a lot about Bobby. He seems relatively normal.
Yeah, and the pictures you showed me, he looks like a Dennis Rader or something.
Mm-hmm. He joined the Army in 1977 and he became a helicopter pilot. He was stationed all over the world and served in the Army for 18 and a half years before he was allowed early retirement due to a workforce reduction in the military. He then joined the Army National Guard in April of 1997 until his arrest in April of 2000.
So what made him in 1997 just start killing people? That's not realistic.
No, and I'll tell you, the Army National Guard base that he was stationed at was in Tacoma. So the murders that happened in Tacoma, I believe, probably happened on the weekends where he had to go to the base to do maneuvers or whatever they do on their weekends. Training, yes.
That makes sense.
And when he was home, he did the ones that were near Spokane.
But this 25-year lull.
When he was in the military, he received many medals and awards. He was a decorated soldier. And when I say he was all over the world, he went to places like Somalia for peacekeeping missions and Germany and things like that. In his personal life, he was married twice, and he had 5 children with his second wife, Linda, who he married in 1976, so the year after Patrick and Susan were murdered. He had 4 daughters and a son. Bobby is still a suspect in several other murders after police found blood in his vehicle that doesn't match any known victim or member of Bobby's family. Also, police in Germany are investigating whether Bobby was responsible for up to 26 deaths there. He had been stationed in Germany for 2 tours of duty while he was in the Army.
That makes sense.
Right, so the lull that you refer to between 1975 and 1997, he was in the Army because he joined the Army in 77. So that time he's all over the world. He could be killing in other countries and we just don't know about it.
If anybody's in Germany listening to us right now, help us out. Do some research on this.
I'm sure he did. I don't have any proof, but you just don't go 25 years, 20 years as a killer and not do it again. Especially he was so prolific in a year,
I
2
know.
years.
This is insane.
It was like a year and a half. They think he killed over the 13 he was charged with. They think it was probably closer to like 18 that they know about.
And what made him decide to bury one in his flower bed?
I know. What was different about her? Very strange.
Very sick that he wants to look out and see her every day.
I know. I just don't get it. Anyway.
He's actually kind of a vanilla serial killer on the outside, but when you peel off the layers, there's a lot going on with him.
And that's what makes him terrifying. He had a job. He had a family.
And he liked to have sex with dead people.
It's the scariest part for me. The Washington State Supreme Court decided in 2018 to abolish the death penalty. Therefore, Bobby's death sentence was commuted to life without the possibility of parole.
Well, given all the serial killers that have been in the state of Washington, they might want to keep that death penalty or bring that back.
Bring that back. I know it was just a few years ago they decided that. So anyway, that's my story about Robert Lee Yates Jr. So everyone, if you have not subscribed or followed, please do so.
We would appreciate it.
If you would like more information about this episode, please visit our website, tntcrimes.com.
Yeah.
And also on our website, you can find information about becoming a member.
And more information on this episode.
Yes, I said that.
Oh, sorry. Never mind. Again, I listen to you like I listen to my husband. I'm sorry, Tanya.
That's okay. And when you become a member, you join our growing list of people who get extra episodes, early releases, commercial free.
Should we do some shout outs?
Sure. Great idea, Talia. Let's do some shout outs.
I'll hold my applause till the end.
We have Deidre, Aurora, Thrill of the Fright, Arlene, Anne, Trista, Brooke, Jeff, April, Megan, Stephanie, Melanie, Margaret, Allison, Bridget, Wendy, Chandler, Ashley, Brandon, Taylor, Elizabeth, Jesse, and last but not least, Danielle.
Wow. Did you say Wendy? Oh.
Thank you, everyone. You guys are awesome. We hope you are enjoying all of the perks that membership brings you.
That's a list of some of the coolest people I've ever known to exist. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all so much. If you would like to learn how to become a member, as I mentioned, you can go to our website or you can go to patreon.com/TNTcrimes. You can find us on social media on Facebook and Instagram at Hardcore True Crime.
Hardcore True Crime.
And I think that's it.
I think that's it.
We got all the business out of the way. So until our next episode.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Don't kill each other.
Bye.
Bye.